Chapter 32. Making Changes. The seventh step of the starting from zero technique is to make changes to bring about the life you desire. At that point, however, the changes may seem too difficult to carry out. You might be expecting strong opposition from the other people involved, and you may wonder how you will ever get through the problems you face. It will probably seem less difficult if you first think through the entire situation you face. If you do, you may find that there is nothing involved that you can't handle. Let's go through it together. As you read this chapter, I'd like you to keep in mind that the most important change you believe you should make. It may have to do with your job, your marriage, an important relationship, whatever it is. Everything I'm about to say will be directed at that change. Prices. There will be a price to pay, of course. Any major change is bound to include one. The price may be an emotional upheaval, the admission of a mistake, the paying of a debt you haven't wanted to acknowledge, the loss of money or property you've thought was yours. Whatever the price, identify it now. What will you have to go through to get where you want to be? The nice part of it is that there is a price you can pay to be free of the situation once and for all. It may be a fantastic price or a tiny one, but there is one. To find out what it is, determine who is involved. Who will you have to deal with? What will those people want? What have you told them they can expect? Maybe you know those people well enough to be able to estimate already what you must pay. As you think about the price, it is important to decide how much you're willing to pay to be free of the box. There's a point beyond which it would no longer be worth it to you to make the change. Decide now what that point is. If it is a business arrangement, would you be willing to give up everything you've created to start over again, taking only your talent and knowledge with you? To be able to use them freely may be worth more in the long run than anything you might have to leave behind. If it is a marriage, would you be willing to give up all the property, custody of the children, everything you own? If you have to, determine now at what point it's not worth it to you to change. Whatever you do, don't evade the price. Face up to everything that's involved. To ignore the price will only make it that much more difficult to handle when the time comes. As you think about this, recognize any commitments you've made. Don't try to avoid responsibilities you've accepted. Each of them represents a price to be paid, and only when you've paid those prices can you be free. Negotiate them if you can. Maybe they can be minimized, but don't expect to avoid them entirely. If you do, you will probably end up paying a higher price than you needed to. If you have agreed to perform a certain job, talk to the person with whom you made the agreement. Maybe it's no longer important to him that you go through with it. But if he's counting on your work, deliver. You might be able to subcontract the work to someone else so that your time will be free, even if the subcontracting would cost you more than you'll receive from the job. It might still be profitable to do it. The extra money you pay out of your pocket might be a small price to pay for your freedom. In fact, you might be able to make more money doing something else with that time. If so, you're better off taking a loss on the original job by subcontracting it. Never be afraid to take a loss on a specific transaction. It will often help you to make more elsewhere. The same principles apply to any other commitments you've made. Recognize them as prices to be paid in time or money for past mistakes. Often, however, you can negotiate a way of paying the price that is less expensive to you and just as satisfactory to the other person. Try to be imaginative in thinking of other alternatives that might work better for everyone concerned. Don't be sidetracked. If you're dealing with someone who wants to punish you or make you pay dearly for your selfishness, don't let it throw you. Understand that an emotionally distraught person might try every trick he can think of to make you feel guilty. Moral recriminations, sympathy seeking, we need you statements. Don't get sidetracked trying to justify yourself or to prove someone else wrong. If he wants to teach you a lesson to satisfy his pride, let him. Don't get caught in the who's right game. Each of you in the situation has made at least one mistake, or you wouldn't be involved now. Maybe you think his mistakes were worse than yours. So what? Is proving that more important than your freedom? No matter who's at fault, recognize that you have mistakes of your own you will have to pay for. Concern yourself with those prices. The other person will have to pay for his own mistakes in some other way. Don't make that your business. It will only tie you up further. Be concerned with your commitments and try to satisfy them as soon as possible. The only commitments that can't be taken seriously are lifetime promises. It's unrealistic to promise lifelong love, devotion, loyalty, or presence. I would be willing to break such promises. I wouldn't expect to get out without paying a price, though. My reputation would suffer, for one thing. But there's no reason to give up the one indispensable element to your happiness, your life, in order to honor a commitment. Obviously, the experience should demonstrate the importance of never again making promises. When the price is determined, try to pay it in as short a time as possible. The sooner you satisfy the obligations, the sooner you will be totally free. If it is merely a confrontation you must go through, get it over with as soon as possible. If it involves money or time, arrange to pay the price in full as soon as you can. Picture it. Once you know what the price will be, picture yourself paying that price. Imagine yourself actually doing the things you will have to do to finish this business. If it is painful, then do it again. Keep picturing yourself paying the price, the whole scene, every bit of dialogue, over and over again until it's no longer painful and terrifying. Recognize everything that might go wrong and imagine yourself dealing with it. What will you say? How will you handle it? How will you respond if someone becomes hysterical? If you do this, it won't be nearly so difficult to handle when you do it in reality. Your emotions will be calmer. You will think more clearly. You will be prepared for surprises and less likely to be thrown off balance. It would be foolish to think you can handle in reality what is too painful and terrifying to imagine. So don't be mentally lazy and hope that everything will go well. Don't take the attitude that things will work out or I can handle whatever develops. Positive thinking won't get you through this. Only realistic preparation will. Children. One of the prices may involve children. If you have children now, ask yourself if they were in the dream world you imagined when starting from zero. If not, you aren't likely to help them or yourself by taking them with you into your new life. Children belong where they're really wanted, not where they're a burden. You don't do anyone a favor when you give up your happiness for him. That can lead too easily to a load of guilt for the beneficiary. You can't hide your sacrifice forever, and it can have very bad consequences when it's discovered. Let the child be raised by someone who wants him dearly and who can give him genuine love and affection. Such things are vital to a child, and they can't be faked. If you choose to give up your children, either to your spouse or for adoption, You will probably be condemned by some of the people around you now, but in your new life, these people may no longer be around you. That won't eliminate all the prices, however. You may be required to support the child financially. Recognize that and determine how you can pay it with a minimum of discomfort to yourself. Also, the price may be in disapproval from new friends when they learn what you've done. Recognize that now, too. How will that affect you? Imagine the disapproval and determine how you will handle it. Another form of the price may be a meeting with your child someday in the future. He may resent you for what you've done. Be sure you can handle that when it happens. Are you really sure you're doing the right thing? Can you explain it? Facing the consequences. Recognize all these possibilities now. Don't ignore them and think you can handle them later. You will have to know what you're doing and why, and what the consequences will be. You can't be free by acting on a whim or on someone's advice. You have to be sure you know what you're doing. I'm not presenting these challenges to talk you out of making big changes. Obviously, I believe that bold action is necessary to get out of a gray existence and into a sunny one. But it's essential that you know what's coming before you act. You have to be convinced that you're acting in the best way, and that means you must realistically face up to every negative factor, every price you can think of, before you act. When you've done that, you can act boldly, with confidence and conviction. Once you know what you're doing, nothing should be allowed to stand in your way. You can then face the censure that might come from those who would prefer that you stay put and shut up. Withdrawal symptoms. One of the most important prices to be paid in dissolving a relationship is emotional. If you give up a child, a spouse, a lover, or a friend, you will probably miss them. You might feel the urge to run back to where you were before. These urges are withdrawal symptoms, temporary emotional reactions to relationships you've left. They're the emotional equivalents of the reactions you get when you give up smoking or some other habit. It's important to recognize now that they will occur. Be prepared for them. Imagine yourself living through them. Cry about them. As with any other price, don't ignore them. Don't take the attitude that you will worry about them when they happen. If you face them now, you will be better prepared to deal with them when they occur later. You won't be thrown off balance and tempted to run back to your old way of life just to eliminate a temporary emotional discomfort. The benefits. Just as you must be prepared for the negative aspects of your change, keep in mind the positive benefits that prompted you to make the change. There's no sure way to keep your emotions under control as you go through the change. But if you keep reminding yourself of the benefits that await you, it will be easier. You know why you want this. You know what you'll have to go through to get there. And you've made such decisions at times when your intellect was in control. Don't throw away your future when your emotions become intense. If your emotions urge you to turn back, remind yourself of the important rule. Don't decide now. Don't make important decisions when your emotions are strong. You can't see all the consequences at such a time. You will have made your decision at the best possible time, when your intellect was in control. Don't throw it away when your emotions become intense. The strongest emotional pressure will be encouragement to turn back in order to avoid paying the price. Don't do it. Keep reminding yourself what you're paying for. Remember that you won't make things better by turning back now. Things will never be the same as they were. The only way to better them is to continue forward to where you've decided to go. Pay the price. Don't be so afraid of sudden, sharp discomfort that you willingly tolerate chronic, continual deadening pain the rest of your life. If you refuse to undergo temporary discomfort, you're resigning yourself to a lifetime with little happiness. The chronic pain can deaden your senses, destroy your love of life, and make you bitter. You won't avoid the price by staying where you are. Instead, you will pay for it every day of your life as you stand on the sidelines and watch exciting alternatives pass you by. And the longer you put off the confrontation, the greater the price to be paid eventually. The most important thing is to act, to do something, to improve your life. From where you stand now, you may be able to see some of the benefits of freedom, but only when you walk through that door will you see all the good things that can be yours on the other side. Even if you can't be sure what awaits you, what's the value in continuing a wrong decision? Is that all your life is worth? Courage. You may feel that you don't have the courage to make big changes in your life, but courage is too often thought of as blind, thoughtless bravado. It usually isn't. People who seem to act courageously usually have specific consequences in mind. They know the consequences both of acting and not acting. They have decided that the consequences of not acting are worse than the consequences of what we consider to be their courageous acts. We don't necessarily know what their motivations are. They might be expectations of good things to come, fear of being thought a coward, desire for attention, etc. But the person acting believes he knows. When you're convinced you know the consequences of either course, you'll take action. If you have to walk through a dangerous mob to get to safety on the other side of the street, you will do so only when you're convinced that the consequences of standing still are more dangerous than moving. Until then, any talk of bravery is meaningless. That's why it's important to think things out in advance. Recognize the problems involved and how you will cope with them, and recognize the benefits that await you. Focus on them and remember them when things get difficult. Once you can see and almost taste the good consequences of being free, once you know how to handle the prices you will have to pay to get there, you will be impatient to start. You won't lack the courage. Certainly, there will be many unknowns, and they can be frightening, but they don't have to remain unknowns. Identify the elements that are mysterious to you, and then try to get the information necessary to take the mystery out of them. If someone's attitude is an unknown factor, ask him what his attitude is. If an unknown factor is the motivation of someone who's causing problems for you, go to him and get it out into the open. Find out what he is trying to accomplish. He may not be articulate enough to explain it, so cultivate the art of asking enough questions to get the answer you need. It's amazing how many mysteries of life can be dissolved just by asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions like, how would you feel if I were to make some changes? What's the matter with our situation? Are you upset with me? Develop the technique of asking for what you want to know. Often, someone will tell you that the answer will depend upon circumstances. If so, find out what circumstances. Keep asking until you know what standard he's using to determine the circumstances. For example, suppose you're considering changing jobs, but there's a possibility of a big raise coming soon. Only you don't know when or how big the raise will be. Find out. Keep asking questions until you know what the circumstances must be in order to get your raise. Do you intend to give me a raise? How much? When? What does it depend upon? What must happen to permit the raise? Have him define such vague terms as substantial raise, increased business, soon, better quality work, etc. Then you can determine if it's worth your while to wait for it. When you clear up all the mysteries, it will be much easier to act. You will know why you're acting. The needs of others. It's easy to be influenced by the apparent needs of others. Your spouse, children, employer, employees, friends, parents, and relatives. They may seem to be dependent upon you. What will happen to them if you put your own freedom first? Let's put your imagination to work one more time. This time, take a few moments to imagine that you're going to die tonight. Yes, die. Pretend that you will no longer be here to satisfy the needs of those who have been your responsibility. After you think about it for a while, you will probably come to a depressing conclusion. Somehow, some way, by some miracle, the world will survive without you. Somehow, your relatives will find someone else to borrow money from. The church will get someone else to arrange the flowers on the altar every Sunday. Your friends will find new people to do favors for them. And your spouse may mourn for a suitable period, and then marry your best friend. Your political crusades will succeed or fail, just as they would if you were around to help. Your club will find someone else to do its fundraising, and those who have leaned so heavily upon you for advice and sympathy will find other shoulders, and probably follow the new advice as infrequently as they did yours. I'm not saying you won't be missed. That isn't the point. The significance is that these people will find ways to survive without you. You're not as indispensable to others as you may have believed. If they can survive without you, why couldn't you just disappear tonight without a trace? Move 1,000 miles away and have a fresh start in an environment where no one knows you and depends upon you. But why even do that? You don't have to move away. If others can survive if you died or moved away, why can't they survive without you while you stay here? Just remove yourself from the relationships and complications that don't add to your well-being. In many ways, you'll be giving others their freedom too. You might be surprised if you knew the discomforts others are suffering in their relationships with you. If a relationship is wrong for you, you can't possibly give to it everything a willing person would. Why not get out of the way and let others find better situations too? Even if they seem content with you, it may be that they, too, are afraid to speak up. You can't know what's best for everyone else. Let nature take its course. Let each person find his own place in the world, in accordance with his identity, his resources, and his desires. You can't see inside of someone else. You can't decide what's good or bad for others. You can only decide for yourself. Surprises. My own experience illustrates the impossibility of knowing what's good for others. I tolerated an unhappy marriage for 8 years. During the last few years of it, I knew I was dissatisfied, but I wouldn't consider a divorce. My wife appeared to be physically and mentally helpless without me. I even feared that she might commit suicide if I left her. When I decided to make the break, she resisted at first, but with much better control of herself than I'd ever seen before. And within 2 weeks, she became a self-sufficient woman, doing many things neither of us had thought she could do. I had stayed with her for years, thinking it would be unfair for me to leave when she had so many problems. But guess what her problem was? As soon as I left, there were no more problems. I never dreamed that could happen, Instead, I had prepared for every dire possibility I could think of. When it turned out so well, it was a simple matter to adjust to my good fortune. Mistaken identities. What else might be standing in the way of your making a change? Are you unwilling to give up the things you've acquired? Perhaps those things aren't really yours. It may be a case of mistaken identities. Are you free to use them in any way you choose? If not, they aren't really yours. If you're concerned about your wealth and property, ask yourself how much ownership you actually have if you have to compromise your desires. If you can't use your wealth to live your life as you want to, why hang on to it so intensely? Are you afraid of losing friends? If those people would turn against you because you've done something for yourself, maybe you don't really have their friendship. What would you lose if they turned away from you? If it's your parents or children that you're afraid of losing, don't be awed by the powerful family mystique. Families can be wonderful, but not just because a group of people happen to be of common blood, or merely bear the label family. If a relationship, family or otherwise, isn't what it should be, why perpetuate it? The love and closeness you need may be more plentiful elsewhere. You can't lose anything that can't be reacquired later, so don't focus on individuals and things. Recognize what it is you desire from them, and consider that you may be able to get it more easily and richly elsewhere. In my case, I decided in advance of the divorce what I would be willing to give up to gain my freedom. Everything. I knew that nothing was right the way it was. I had a lovely house, nice furniture, some savings, a pretty wife, a compromised relationship with my parents, and a lovely daughter. But none of them satisfied what I really wanted. When my wife said she wanted it all, including sole access to my daughter, I accepted those terms without fighting. I knew I could reacquire everything I really wanted on a better basis. I've since acquired far more property than I could have earned where I was. The intellectual stimulation I had always missed is now mine. I have satisfying relationships now that were out of reach where I was before. My parents acted as you might expect parents to act. At first, they took my wife's side and tried to influence me to turn back, but they soon accepted the situation, acknowledged that I had acted rightly, and are now much better friends than they were before. I haven't seen my daughter since the divorce 9 years ago, in accordance with the agreement. But that too was a case of mistaken identity. I was fairly close to her and I loved her, but it wasn't possible to have the kind of parent-child relationship I believed is right. To keep the marriage intact, I had compromised my own ideas about raising children. I went along with traditions of morality and religion that I didn't really believe. I wasn't being myself. I wasn't giving her the things I have to offer. What I did give her could have been had from many other men. What she lost by being separated from me has been replaced by someone else. What I lost was something I never really had: the opportunity to raise a child with enthusiasm, genuine rapport, and mutual understanding, and the freedom to be the kind of example I would like to set for a child. I won't make those mistakes again. They wouldn't be corrected where I was without someone having to sacrifice. Now that I'm free, I can find the right relationships in situations that are appropriate to what I want and need. There were withdrawal symptoms, of course, but I was prepared for them. As it turned out, they were few, probably because I was prepared and because I was too busy making the most of my new life. All I missed was my daughter, but I could accept that temporary sadness and even cry about it, without any temptation to escape the sadness by jumping back into the box. I was considerate and understanding of others, but I never thought that I should forfeit my free future for what others seemed to want. I knew that they would survive without me, and that it was up to them to determine how. Your problem. Everything I have said in this chapter has been intended to help you think through a major change you may be contemplating. The more you're prepared for what is to come, the easier it will be for you to act. Recognize what you have to do. Anticipate all the prices and picture yourself paying them. Be straightforward with everyone concerned, and don't be ashamed of what you're doing. Above all, recognize the prices in advance. Don't act whimsically, ignoring the consequences to come. Be prepared to have some of the unknown factors turn out negatively, and decide in advance how you will handle them if they do. Expect in advance the disapproval, the emotional difficulty, the withdrawal symptoms, and savor the good things that your freedom can bring you. Keep them in mind as you act. Know why you're taking action. If, after thinking about these things, you still feel unable to act, ask yourself what you would do if you knew you were going to die next year. Once you knew you didn't have time to re-educate everyone and arrange things to everyone's satisfaction, what would you do? You would probably realize and accept the fact that someone will have to be displeased by your actions because you wouldn't have time to satisfy everyone. You would probably get busy and settle your affairs on some basis in order to have some time left to live as you want to. You wouldn't let anything prevent you from being free to enjoy the time left. Well, face it, you are going to die. You are not going to live forever. You may live for decades, or you may die in an accident tomorrow, but you are going to die someday. Are you going to wait until the last moment before you start living for yourself? You don't even know when the last moment will be. What could be more important than getting a clean start right now so you can satisfy your dreams before it's too late? They're your dreams. It's your life. No one else is going to make things right for you. Only your actions can provide the kind of life you want. Your time has finally come. Make the most of it.